A royal rehearsal turned into chaos when Princess Anne abruptly walked out minutes before cameras rolled after Queen Camilla made a demand so outrageous it stunned even the palace's most seasoned aides. The walkout wasn't just dramatic, it was historic. And behind Anne's silence lies a truth the monarchy can't suppress any longer. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. With Coronation Day fast approaching, tensions behind the palace gates had reached a boiling point. The royal family was already walking a tightrope, balancing tradition, strained relationships, and a desperate desire to appear unified in front of the world. But the pressure became unbearable the moment Camilla made her final rehearsal demand. Princess Anne, the king's only sister, would be expected to perform a public act of deference toward the queen consort during the procession, an unprecedented break from royal protocol. The request landed like a thunderclap. It was more than ceremonial, it was symbolic. Camilla, still struggling for full acceptance in royal circles, was asking the monarchy to visually declare her superiority over a woman born into the bloodline. Behind the scenes, nerves were already fraying. For weeks, quiet disagreements had been playing out in rehearsal halls, in dressing rooms, in whispered strategy meetings. Anne had been unusually withdrawn, reportedly uncomfortable with how Camilla's role was being expanded and framed. The two women had never been close, but this went beyond personality clashes. Witnesses in the rehearsal space say Anne didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at Camilla, nodded once, and walked away. The doors closed behind her, and she was gone. Stunned aides scrambled to explain the absence to waiting photographers. Schedules were reprinted, media was silenced, but the damage had already been done. The image of Princess Anne leaving the rehearsal minutes before the official run-through sent shockwaves through the palace. As speculation erupted behind closed doors, aides and senior courtiers began asking the question everyone feared. Was this a private act of protest, or a public rejection of Camilla's reign? And if it was the latter, what would happen next? To understand why Anne walked out, we have to look at the secret demands Camilla made behind closed doors, demands that would challenge centuries of royal tradition. Camilla didn't just want a crown, she wanted dominance. According to insiders, her latest demand wasn't about seating or protocol. It was about status and forcing Anne to kneel before her. A request laced with symbolism, ambition, and centuries of tension between the monarchy's bloodline and its chosen queen. The demand was made quietly, under the guise of modernizing the ceremony and emphasizing unity. But behind the language of progress was a move so bold, so unprecedented, that it shattered every unspoken boundary within the firm. Asking Princess Anne, daughter of a queen, sister to a king, and lifelong servant to the crown, to bow before a woman who married into the monarchy, and not even until decades after scandal, was seen by many as an insult masked in ceremony. It wasn't just a breach of tradition, it was a challenge to Anne's legacy, her blood, and everything she had endured in silence. Camilla, emboldened by her new position and her inner circle of supporters, believed this moment was her coronation in every sense, not just of title, but of supremacy. For weeks, she had been quietly adjusting seating plans, rewriting ceremonial language, and lobbying for changes that would shift visual and symbolic power directly to her. This was no longer about co-reigning beside Charles. It was about standing above those who once looked down on her. But not everyone was compliant. Princess Anne, whose sense of duty eclipses even her pride, had already shown signs of resistance. So had others. Catherine, William, and even some senior aides expressed concern over the tone of Camilla's influence. The request to bow was the final line. The rehearsal team, caught in the crossfire, leaked fragments of what they had witnessed. Notes, call sheets, even whispered audio clips began circulating proof that Camilla was pushing hard and that Anne's name was at the center of her demands. Through it all, Charles remained silent. Whether out of fear, fatigue, or political calculation, the king chose not to intervene, and that silence, in Anne's eyes, was just as loud as the demand itself. But this wasn't the first time Camilla and Anne had clashed, and what happened months earlier may have been the beginning of this explosive standoff. Beneath the royal smiles, a storm had been brewing for years. Camilla and Anne's relationship has always been icy, but it recently crossed into open hostility. And those close to both women say Anne had drawn a line long before rehearsal day ever arrived. From the moment Camilla was accepted as queen consort, something in Anne shifted. It wasn't petty jealousy or a matter of rank, it was something deeper, a buried loyalty, a private rage that only surfaced in quiet refusals and unspoken gestures. Anne had watched the monarchy endure scandal, heartbreak, and transformation, but the one thing she had never accepted was the erasure of Diana's legacy. In Anne's eyes, Diana had suffered enough, and Camilla's rise wasn't a neutral ascent, it was a replacement. For years, Anne had kept her distance, maintaining the dignity expected of her station. But insiders confirm that during private meetings, Camilla's requests were often met with firm, unyielding resistance from Anne. Whether it was ceremonial hierarchy, appearances at joint events, or shared speaking roles, Anne made it clear. She would not play co-star to a woman who, in her view, had played a key role in fracturing the family. At one garden party, Anne reportedly declined to stand beside Camilla for a photo. At another, she left early after overhearing a comment made by a member of Camilla's staff. These weren't isolated events, they were part of a silent campaign of boundaries, and Camilla noticed. Behind palace walls, their feud became a whispered topic among aides. Protocol teams often found themselves caught between conflicting demands, each trying to accommodate without igniting scandal. The staff learned to plan entrances and exits with distance in mind. They stopped trying to push Camilla and Anne into the same space, because when they did, tension followed. Anne never spoke ill publicly. She didn't need to. Her message was clear in every refusal, every withdrawal, every cold glance. She wasn't here to play games. She was here to preserve a code of honor she believed had already been violated too many times. And so, when the coronation rehearsals began and Camilla's ambitions became unavoidable, the fracture that had existed in silence finally split open. But when the rehearsal began and Anne realized what Camilla expected of her, she didn't just resist, she chose rebellion. Sources say the room froze. Camilla issued her demand. Anne stood still, said nothing, and walked out, leaving stunned royals in her wake. What happened in those 10 minutes will go down in royal history and may have permanently fractured the family's inner circle. The rehearsal had begun like any other, calculated, quiet, ceremonial. The air was heavy with expectation, the atmosphere charged with the pressure of perfect optics. Each step had been timed, every glance rehearsed, every gesture scripted to meet the standards of tradition. But what no one had prepared for was Camilla's final assertion of power. Midway through the choreography, she allegedly interrupted the flow, calling for an unscheduled adjustment. What followed, according to those present, was a statement framed as tradition but meant as dominance. Anne, Camilla declared, would be expected to approach, pause, and bow her head at a precise moment in the coronation sequence. The room fell silent. Not a ripple moved through the assembled royals. Anne, who had held her place with stillness, let the silence linger for a beat too long, and then, without a word, without a glance, she turned and walked out. The gesture was not loud, not dramatic by design, but its weight shattered every illusion of unity. William was seen stiffening beside Catherine, who remained composed but visibly unsettled. Their silence said everything. Behind them, Charles was frozen. His eyes followed his sister's exit, but his voice failed to follow. There was no protest, no instruction, just silence. A silence that echoed through every corner of the palace. Immediately, the mood shifted. Planners panicked. Schedules unraveled. Staff whispered behind curtains and texted behind closed doors. What had been a simple rehearsal was now a full-blown crisis. Anne's absence was impossible to explain without drawing questions, and yet no one could lie convincingly. Not with the tension still hanging in the air. Camilla remained composed, but aides closest to her noted a quiet fury building behind her controlled expression. This wasn't just about protocol, this was about control, and Anne had just refused to be controlled. As Anne's car sped away from the palace, the public had no idea what had just happened. But the leaks were already starting. Within hours, the press had the story, and it wasn't sanitized. The first headline came from a tabloid notorious for royal scoops, but this time, the language was restrained, calculated. Princess Anne walks out of Coronation Rehearsal, amid tensions with Queen Camilla, it read. Not speculative, not vague. It sounded sourced, and that set off alarms. Only a handful of people had witnessed the full moment, and even fewer would dare speak to the media. That meant the leak wasn't random, it was strategic. Some believe the source came from Anne's inner circle, a subtle yet powerful message to those who'd questioned her silence for years. Others whispered that it came from a palace aide who had grown increasingly frustrated by Camilla's influence and saw Anne's walkout as a symbol of resistance worth amplifying. What raised further eyebrows was the timing. The leak hit the media before the palace's official press release for the upcoming coronation schedule had even been finalized. That wasn't coincidence. It was sabotage. By breaking the news early, the source ensured that no amount of spin or reshuffling could bury what had already reached the public. Inside the firm, panic set in. Crisis meetings were held. PR teams scrambled to release neutral statements, calling the incident a scheduling misunderstanding and a private matter. But the damage was done. Camilla's name was trending alongside Anne's, and not in the way the palace had hoped. And beneath the surface, new tensions rose as staff began to take sides, those aligned with Camilla's vision of modernization versus those loyal to the crown's older, more disciplined traditions represented by Anne. Even the royal family's own courtiers, long trained to remain invisible, were whispering about what this meant. The monarchy, long thought to be united behind a single image, was fracturing, and the public wasn't turning away in confusion. They were watching with a newfound clarity. Sympathy flooded toward Anne, viewed now not as the quiet workhorse of the crown, but as the one royal bold enough to walk away rather than bow to a demand she couldn't stomach. But the true fallout wouldn't be media-driven, it would be felt inside the monarchy's most sacred walls. For Charles, this wasn't just a scandal, it was a test of loyalty. Would he side with the sister who stood by him for decades, or the queen who shares his throne? What he chose next would send shockwaves through the palace. In the hours following Anne's exit and the media's swift unraveling of the truth, Charles was silent. Not out of ignorance, but paralysis. Those closest to him say he was torn between duty and diplomacy, trapped in the space where emotion and expectation collide. He made no public statement, no correction, no denial. Behind the scenes, however, the pressure was immense. He reached out to Anne privately through a series of messages delivered by trusted aides, but none were answered. Her silence was louder than any press headline. Camilla, on the other hand, was not so restrained. Her frustration grew by the hour, as public sympathy for Anne surged, and online discourse began to question Camilla's influence over the coronation. She expected Charles to step forward and defend her. He didn't. Instead, he buried himself in meetings, choosing to manage the optics rather than confront the core. William, ever the bridge between tradition and reform, stepped in quietly. Palace insiders revealed he was the only royal actively communicating with both sides. His goal, to keep the family from collapsing before the world's eyes. But the tension was palpable. The rehearsal schedule was rewritten overnight. Entire segments of the ceremony were adjusted to avoid further conflict. Anne's presence was now categorized as optional in internal memos. That alone spoke volumes. For the first time in generations, the royal family feared that a coronation, a moment meant to symbolize unity and continuity, might be permanently marred by division. The conversation shifted from logistics to survival. Could the institution withstand another fracture? Could the public still believe in its cohesion? The whispers were growing louder, not just from the outside, but from within the monarchy itself. And as Charles stared down the most consequential moment of his reign, he realized that silence was no longer a shield. It was a weapon used against him by both sides. But while Charles scrambled behind closed doors, Anne had already begun taking steps that no one expected, especially not Camilla. She's known for loyalty and discipline, but this time, Anne spoke. Without naming names, she made a public statement that left no doubt about where she stands and what she refuses to accept. At a charity engagement unrelated to the coronation, Anne stepped before a small audience, fully composed yet unmistakably resolute. In her speech, she avoided politics, ignored ceremony, and instead spoke from a place far deeper principle. She said, "There are moments when duty must be separated from hierarchy, and when history is watching, the greatest loyalty is to truth, not title." The room was silent, and then came the applause not out of politeness, but conviction. Former royal staff, some long retired and others still within the fold, began offering subtle but unmistakable signs of support. Behind palace walls, aides confirmed the ripple effect had begun. Anne's stance was no longer a quiet protest, it had become a movement. Across social media and public forums, Diana's name surged once more into the spotlight, not in scandal, but in remembrance. The parallels between Anne's silent resistance and Diana's legacy of defiance were undeniable. Where one had walked away from the crown's expectations, the other had stood immovable in the face of its evolving demands. Public polls shifted overnight. Camilla's favourability dipped sharply, while Anne's soared. Commentators began framing her not as the spare royal or working princess, but as the last true embodiment of royal integrity. Even more telling was the quiet support coming from younger royals. Whispers of solidarity emerged from Kensington. Aides close to William and Catherine were careful, but clear there was admiration for Anne's courage, and more importantly, a growing discomfort with how far Camilla's influence had reached. What had started as a walkout had now evolved into a declaration, one that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. And while Charles remained caught between roles as brother, husband, and king, it was clear that one woman had chosen her side with absolute clarity. Anne had broken ranks not out of rebellion, but out of loyalty to something deeper than protocol. With Anne's position now crystal clear, all eyes turned back to Camilla, whose next move would either rebuild her image or destroy it completely. Camilla wasn't backing down. In a bold counterstrike, she attempted to assert full control of the coronation optics, but what she didn't realize was that the tide had already turned. Determined to reclaim control over the narrative, Camilla began pushing for sweeping revisions behind palace walls. She demanded a reshuffling of seating charts that would subtly but unmistakably reduce Anne's visibility throughout the ceremony. Instead of Anne standing in direct view during the key moments, her position was reassigned further back strategically, symbolically. Camilla also requested amendments to the official scripts. Mentions of Princess Anne's ceremonial role were softened, reworded, in some cases removed entirely. Even the procession order was quietly altered to ensure Camilla's presence would dominate the televised image. The goal was clear: reclaim the narrative, silence the defiance, and ensure that no walkout or statement would overshadow the Queen Consort's crowning moment. At first, Charles resisted. He hesitated, reportedly calling the changes unwise and provocative. But after hours of pressure and relentless persuasion from Camilla's inner circle, he relented. That decision fractured what was left of the palace's internal unity. William and Catherine were the first to push back. William, once seen as a potential stabilizer, now found himself openly questioning the tone of the coronation. Catherine, ever poised, is said to have voiced concern about optics versus principle. Their resistance, while private, began to ripple. And then came the leak. A single photograph taken during the final setup rehearsal surfaced online. It showed the royal gallery in pristine condition, every seat labelled except one, the spot where Anne had once been expected to stand. The tag was missing. The implication was damning. The image went viral within hours. Public backlash erupted, painting Camilla as vindictive, petty, and out of touch with the moment. Commentators called the move a public erasure, while satirical headlines mocked the palace's obsession with controlling the image rather than preserving integrity. For Camilla, it was the opposite of a victory. What was meant to be her final consolidation of power had become a public unraveling. Every attempt to downplay Anne's absence only elevated her defiance. And then, as the palace reeled from the public fallout, Anne made one final move, one that changed everything. She didn't need a crown to prove her power. Anne, in the shadows of chaos, restored something the monarchy had nearly lost: dignity, and her final gesture redefined the meaning of royal loyalty for a new generation. While the world's eyes turned to the Golden Isle of Westminster, waiting for confirmation of who would and wouldn't appear, Anne made her move not with words, but with unwavering clarity. She declined her place in the official coronation ceremony. Instead, she quietly arrived unannounced at a small private service honouring Diana's memory, held at the Spencer estate on the very same day. There were no cameras, no media spectacle. Just Anne, standing where it all began to unravel decades ago, paying tribute to a legacy too often overshadowed. Word of her presence spread quickly, and the public response was immediate. Across platforms, broadcasts, and headlines, praise for Anne surged once again. The last true royal, they called her. Not for defying the throne, but for reminding the nation what it means to serve something greater than ego. Behind palace walls, aides who once viewed her stance as disruptive were now re-evaluating. Anne's position in future planning meetings was no longer a formality, it became a necessity. She had reclaimed relevance, not through ambition, but by embodying principle in its purest form. Even Charles, cornered by circumstance and regret, took a private step few expected. He penned a handwritten letter to his sister, an apology, sources say. Not just for the ceremony, but for allowing silence to do what he never intended: distance the most loyal person in his orbit. And while the letter will likely never be made public, its existence confirms one thing: Anne's message had landed. Her presence had echoed, and her departure had forced accountability. Meanwhile, William began meeting privately with his most trusted advisors. Though nothing was said outright, a shift had started. The optics of the next generation, the tone of the future monarchy, was being reshaped quietly, and Anne's resilience had become the blueprint. As for Camilla, the aftermath was quiet, but undeniable. Her role, though not formally altered, began to shrink. Fewer engagements, softer presence, less authority behind the curtain. She still wore the crown, but it was no longer the center of the story. That honor now belonged to someone else. The crown may still sit atop Camilla's head, but in the hearts of the people, a new symbol of strength has already been crowned. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.